The design Herein barriers we're talking about today are offices that aren't designed for women.
Okay. So I mean I want to throw in my own quote, like it's not in this list that we're looking at. Do you know what really annoys me still to this day? And I'm sure this is one of the things that is picked up in the book Invisible Women. I remember working in one of the buildings in the company that we used to work at, and it was absolutely freezing cold, like so cold I would have to sit at my computer with my coat on for about 30 minutes with the heater on until I could actually be comfortable enough to start to type, which is, when you're doing computational modeling, you need to type, right? And I used to sit there and think, how much is this costing the company in terms of my wasted time, because they can't be bothered to have the building at the right temperature for me to be able to work?
I know that the temperatures are set lower for men because it's the optimum temperature for men, and men's bodies naturally do sit at a higher temperature. Your office was bad for both men and women. Like
it was really bad. And when I used to say, like, I literally used to say, this office is too cold, I just used to get shut down with, look at the thermometer on the wall, that's a reasonable temperature. Building facilities manager, if that's what the job's called, I remember them coming round and saying, are there any problems with the building? And I'll be like, yes, it's freezing, I'm always cold, like it's so cold I feel sick when I come to work. And they'd be like, yeah, we hear this a lot, and then just left. Like, and I'm like, what? Why do you ask the question if you're not going to do anything about a solution? It's like, yeah, we hear this a lot. I'm like, okay, well, great, but why keep walking around hearing it over and over again if you're not going to do anything about it?
yeah.
So that's my personal peeve. But looking at these quotes, badly designed offices, gaps in steps, walkways, etc., which aren't great when wearing heels, they get stuck, and concerns when wearing a dress or skirt from those looking up from the floor steps below. And actually, I've actually had a conversation with the person that sent this one in. Like, do you know how when you work in an office and there are stairs, but the stairs gaps between them? Like when
Yeah.
you're wearing a dress or a skirt in summer, like you can literally just see someone's underwear pretty much. And so it makes it really awkward, right? When you're walking up the stairs and then maybe you want to take the lift instead because you don't want people to see up your skirt. And then this whole burden of having to think about how you literally get from the front of your building to your desk without someone seeing your underwear. Um, and then some people are just like, oh, why don't you just wear trousers? And it's like, why should I have to modify my clothing to feel comfortable coming to work? Like, shouldn't we design the building so that everyone can come here?
So being expected to hot desk without required equipment available to make the workstation DSE safe. So actually, hot desking I think is something that's becoming more popular, but it's a issue for both men and women because if there's not the right equipment on the desk, you can't work properly. The right screen height, the right chair. It's an absolute nightmare. And I know in my office there are chairs that are too hard for me to push back because they're so tightly wound that my shoulders can't. But men, because their weight are on their shoulders, they lean back and nearly fall backwards because they're just not designed for anyone.
I was like, I thought you were just telling me you were weak.
I am weak. Don't get me wrong. But
okay, so the next one is the next quote: lack of facilities like toilets or showers.
Yeah, and we've heard this across the board. Actually, I don't know whether they're in these comments or through other conversations that there are women don't always have the right toilets, or they are unisex toilets. However, because it's predominantly men on site, it's always used by men. And when a random woman comes to the site, she's got to then use a facility that's unisex. However, it's always been used by a man, so it is a male toilet.
And no sanitary bins. Yeah. No sanitary bins in there for women. But actually, it's interesting that the comment you make around toilet. There's a quote here: walking miles. So women having to walk miles to get to a toilet on site, and then having to find the key to the toilet because it's locked. Okay, so this is one of those where like people will say, oh yeah, there are facilities for women, but they have to really go out of their way in the working day to access them, which is just, one more barrier to doing your job well, because it's that little bit harder to just do basic things that you need to do throughout the day.
Yeah, and it's also the additional time that you take out of the day having to walk to the toilet and access that facility. Like, it takes a lot out if you're in the middle of something and getting distracted or running between meetings. If you've then got to do that, then you're the one late to the meeting. Not because because you're late, it's because you've not accessed the facilities. However,
Yeah.
you're the one who's late to the meeting, and that's what will be reflected on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the last quote here, which I think is interesting because it sounds like it comes from the nuclear sector: lack of awareness in plant design. So this person couldn't operate some valves which were too high, and most control panels were too high up for them to be able to see them properly. And they're an average height woman. Now, that's really concerning to me, right? I know the nuclear sector's got some pretty ambitious goals for their gender diversity within their workforce by like 2050. And I'm like, if we're creating energy solutions in nuclear, for example, for the future, if the buildings that we're designing, they don't last 10 years, right? They're like 50 years, 70 years, something like this. If we're designing buildings that are going to last 70 years and average height women can't access some of the equipment, that is a real problem, right? And who's been designing these buildings like this? Like, what are they doing?
But I would say I'm quite tall for a woman, and I know that there are issues where I can't reach certain things. And I know you are as well. Like, we're both 5'6", 5'7", and if things are out of reach for us and we're taller than the average, what has happened to people like 5'2"? And I know it wasn't that many years ago that the height for police officers actually got reduced to allow more women to join the firm, because join the force, because they actually had a height restriction that was quite high, which ruled a lot of women out. So things need to be addressed, and obviously a lot more than they already have.
I know that you specifically have issues with your kitchen.
Yeah, I can't reach everything. Can't close the top cupboards, and I think, talk to the stereotypes that the woman's place in the kitchen. It's definitely not made for me.
So hard. But I think the key takeaway, right, for me is that this design influences the way in which women have to behave and interact with their environment to their detriment. Like, I think that's the key thing that I'm taking away.
Yeah, and I think it's across the board. I feel like, I know in the future we're going to have conversations about the transport sector and how things are just like, we're not designed in there, and there's just so many fundamental barriers for women to enter the workplace, do their daily things, just because we weren't thought about, or we were thought about from a male perspective rather than being actually in that design process. And that's why design her in is so important. These were mine and Marie's experiences. Tell us yours in the comments.